Hey everybody, Caleb Crew here with Caleb Crew Reports and Predicts. We're about to be interviewing the former Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates, Kirk Cox, who's currently a delegate and exploring a run for governor. So I'm going to pause this recording till he gets there, and it's going to be about a 20-minute interview, and I may have to contain T Gray. He wants to be in the camera, and he has to realize he can't. But thank you guys for watching this video, and I want to pause it as we wait for the speaker. Well, for everybody tuning into this video, when I post it later on, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'm just overjoyed to have Delegate Kirk Cox, who's the former Speaker of the House of Delegates here in Virginia and exploring a run for governor. It just means so much to have somebody, a front runner candidate, to come on to onto my YouTube channel and do an interview. So Kirk, my first question for you is just if you could just give us a brief introduction and just kind of give a little bit of your background and why you're interested in exploring a run for governor.
Caleb, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My background is I'm a 30-year government and history teacher, public school teacher, and mainly in the Chesterfield County area. And I love doing that. I was never going to do this. I was never going to be in politics. I was going to be a famous basketball and baseball coach. And I coached JV baseball, and I have 4 boys, and I coached them. And then this will sound maybe a little bit unusual, but when I was teaching way back in 1985, I decided, Caleb, that I really wanted some firsthand experience. So I was a big Republican. I'd been a Reagan Bush, boy, that goes back in 1984, co-chair. And I volunteered for a guy named Wyatt Durrett that was running for governor. So I drove him all around the state for a year, took a leave from teaching. I met President Reagan, Vice President Bush. The driver gets to go anywhere. He only gets paid like $500 a month, but man, he gets to see a lot of good people. And that was fun. And we lost, unfortunately, but I got the bug. I said, I really would like to run myself. And so I decided to run for the House of Delegates in 1989. And I had literally hundreds of students and volunteers. I was supposed to get killed. Somehow I won. And so I was in the House of Delegates. In those days, we only had 39 Republicans. Did you know we eventually got to the majority around 2000? I had the chance, which was a lot of fun, to work up to majority leader and did that for about 8 years. And we, of course, led the debate on the floor as majority leader and then speaker for 2 years. I'm very interested in running for governor. I love public policy. I mean, there's so many areas, and we'll discuss a little bit this, whether it be higher ed or K-12. I know for your region in particular, workforce and economic development is everything. I was a vice chairman of our budget committee, so I do feel like I'm very qualified. I've delved in a lot of different areas. I put in 120 bills dealing with veterans, so I feel like I have the breadth of experience. I would say our current governor, Ralph Northam, just is not led at all on a whole host of issues. But and I really do feel like I'm a leader. I mean, people are looking for someone that's going to step up, make tough decisions, make good decisions. I feel like I have those qualities. So those are some of the reasons that I'm running. I know you hear a lot of this from your friends, et cetera. And we just something about, and that's the positive. The negative is the Democrats have total control. And for the last 8 months, they've had the governorship, they've had before them, but the governorship, the House and the Senate, and the policies they put in, Caleb, have been terrible. I mean, whether you're an advocate of the Second Amendment, as a government teacher, a fundamental right in the Bill of Rights. We saw terrible bills, about 8 of them last session. We have seen the life issue attacked. And really roll back 20 years of great things we did there. This special session we're in, we've seen law enforcement just attacked at every turn. They actually have $28 million in this current budget we're about to adopt just to do all their anti-law enforcement agenda. So I could drone on and on and on about that, but I think a combination of just seeing what's happened in Virginia, a great state. I can almost argue we've literally become California in 8 months. and also having a vision for a Ronald Reagan vision to where do you want to take this state? A candidate needs both. So those are some of the reasons I'm interested in governor.
Uh, so my next question is, with all your experience, and it's an economic question. This is about for rural areas, and kind of the background of the question is as you know, Virginia is a very diverse state, and economically, there are some areas of Virginia that have been doing well, even when, we hear a lot about Virginia used to be the best state to do business in. And even then, while certain areas of Virginia were doing well, Southwest Virginia, a lot of the rural areas didn't always get a piece of that success. So if you are elected governor, what are kind of some policy ideas that you have that could help rural areas and other economic distressed areas become successful and build up that infrastructure that they need to succeed?
It's a great question. Number one, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure you spend a lot of time out there. And so, I have some great friends, whether it be Terry Kilgore, I shouldn't start naming names, Todd Fillion. You have a great delegation, and I know them very well. So first of all, you have to come out and spend a lot of time, but you make a lot of great points. And so let me tick off some things. We put through a program called Go Virginia, probably about 2 years ago. I was the sponsor of that legislation. A little different way of looking at economic development. For years, Virginia sort of tried to land the big fish. Nothing wrong with that, the Amazons, the Microns. I'm not sure Southwest Virginia has always benefited from that, even though they could with some of the spinoffs for those. But Go Virginia divided Virginia into regions and basically gave a pot of money to every region to sort of come up with things from a workforce or higher ed standpoint that would work for them, and the state would incentivize that. So for example, in my area, in the Prince George area, we had sort of the aerospace industry was big. We had apprenticeship schools, et cetera. So that's something Go Virginia would emphasize. If you're down at the port, obviously in Hampton Roads, you would emphasize that. In Southwest Virginia, there's a lot going on. There's everything from, there's a little bit of tourism going on from Cricket Trail to the birthplace of country music. Enhancing some of that tourism piece is an interesting thing. So Go Virginia certainly is weighed in on that. Education, I think, is key out your way. The schools are not, it probably is, even infrastructure-wise, what you would see in Northern Virginia. So, for example, we got to be creative. This year, something I helped push, we took part of the lottery money, and a lot of you know that goes to education. We took 30% of it aside for infrastructure, and that can be used for school construction, et cetera, on the K-12 piece. On the higher ed piece, there are a lot of higher ed, what we sort of call education centers. There's Southwest out your way more, there's Roanoke, there's Southern Virginia, and those are really, really key. And what I mean by they're key is we can do a lot of credential programs out that way. We have got to create more of a critical mass. If the skilled workers are there and they're giving the training, you'll see a lot of industries today that will really like Northern Virginia because of the great amenities, just the great atmosphere. The people are wonderful, but you got to have a skilled workforce. And so I think particularly workforce credentials are very, very important. Not everyone's going to go to a 4-year degree. There's some really innovative programs we're now doing with some of the higher ed centers. Telemedicine is going to be huge, I think, out your way. And right now, there's a partnership with UVA where you have a nurse practitioner who can actually see that patient through telemedicine. That's a field that I think is pretty lucrative to look at. One of the things I have also really pushed is, as far as economic development, is something called the READY Initiative. And this is something that private business is partnering with the community colleges, et cetera, to pay for 2/3 of your credentials, especially in this pandemic when you might have lost your jobs. And these are credentials you can get very, very quickly. And they are in areas that are demand areas. I think that could be very, very effective. So there are a lot of things in the education realm. There are a lot of things in the economic development realm that I think we really need to do. And we got to listen a little bit. when Chris Jones, the Republican, and I was very high up on appropriations, we came out to Southwest Virginia. We toured the birthplace of country music. We toured the Southwest Higher Education Center. We actually went out and looked at, New College, which is more Danville, but we went to Allar, we went to a lot of different places and saw what they were doing and asked them specific questions about what do you need, etc. One of the things we just have not done is spend enough time and listen to the people that are out in that region.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, since you mentioned some of our great legislators, my former delegate and political mentor who actually helped get me started, and that's Delegate Will Moorfield. I just have to throw his name in there.
Will had a very creative piece of legislation, I think, where he teamed up with a Democrat that actually I think was Will works very hard to bring, I think, as hard as anybody, especially on the energy issues, as you know, and has been very instrumental. So I knew the biggest mistake, I can name like 8, but you have a very effective delegation. Will probably is one of the top guys I know.
Yeah, we are really proud of our delegation here in Southwest Virginia because we're so far behind the ball compared to some other regions anyway, so we have to have very effective legislators. Before I really get into my next question, I just kind of want to make a quick comment, and that is, I think when we're talking about this distressed economics, it really shows kind of the change in Southwest Virginia, that we're really not talking about Southwest Virginia with coal as a major piece going forward. It's definitely a piece of the puzzle, but it just shows kind of the changing demographics out here and how just kind of the world itself is kind of sadly moving on from coal, and we need other pieces of the puzzle. If you want to make a quick comment on that.
Well, you're right. I mean, I do think some of those policies were unfortunate under the Democrats, and clean coal technology to me was, I really despair what happened with that between Hillary Clinton and sort of Ralph Northam. The coal tax credit, which the Democrats, as you know, sort of eliminated this year, I didn't like, because I think you do still need time to transition to something. To your point, that transition has to take place, and that's why me and you are talking about so many innovative types of things that need to take place there. And the great thing is about an economy that's become, much more global. But if you look at places like Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, and a lot of the supply chain, and a lot of the other types of things are going to happen in places like Southwest Virginia. And I think especially in some of those education areas, et cetera, they can set up very innovative programs where you're going to be key to some of the supply chains, et cetera, because of your good labor force, et cetera. And people getting tired of, I guess, Northern Virginia and the traffic problems, et cetera.
And so my next question is taking us a little off economics and getting to, I think, an issue that especially a lot of primary voters is very dear to them, and kind of voters as a whole. And we see that playing out in the Supreme Court nomination battle right now, and that's life. And I just want to say I really admire your stance when you relinquish the speakership briefly to go into your seat and to kind of speak for the voiceless of those of the unborn, and they don't have a voice. And it's politicians like you have really been standing up and fighting for life. And kind of with kind of the, I guess my question is, how do you see the future of the pro-life movement in Virginia shifting with Democrats in control? What can we do to advance the cause of life? And also, if you just want to kind of inform everybody briefly on your position on pro-life issues.
Well, pro-life was one of the reasons I ran. I have such a heart for that issue, and you can go to the Psalms where David, talks about being, knit together in your mother's womb, and Lord, our Creator, created each and every one of us, and we're so unique. I mean, I used to say that if you look at someone's eye, there are over 200,000 functions, and it's an amazing thing. And just every life is is very precious. And I did decide that when the Democrats were really pushing really third trimester abortions up until birth, abortion up until birth, and of course, the governor made, I would say, his infamous statement, about keeping the infant warm and alive, and I mean, not alive, but keeping the infant comfortable and basically pushing up to infanticide. In the Kathy Tron bill that sort of codified all that, which we were able to kill. And one of the reasons why the way the speaker works is you're up on a high dais, and to your point, and thank you for that, you actually do have a seat on the floor. It's probably the worst seat on the floor. It's way in the corner because the speaker never uses it. And I've been there 31 years, and I've never seen a speaker ever come off the dais and speak. And I just felt like that issue was so important to me, and we were just going so much in the wrong direction. That was right when the New York Senate had flipped Republican to Democrat, and they had passed some very radical abortion legislation. So we were able to defeat that. We were in control. Unfortunately, Kip, to your point, when the Democrats took control, this has saddened me greatly, overturned 20 years worth of pro-life legislation, whether it be informed consent, parental consent, etc. But here's the good news. The good news is, I would say, the younger generation on some issues, you get a little bit upset on socialism, tend to be believers in life, and that's a good thing. When Kathy Tron pushed the third trimester up until birth abortion bill, I think it showed Virginians where the Democrats are on that issue. It shocked them. It appalled them. You really saw a shift, I think, in public opinion on that issue. So to your point, what can we do? I think that's an issue we need to be bold and go out and talk about what we believe, talk about what the Democrats have tried to do. Why do we believe so much in life? Why do we think life is so precious? Why is that so fundamental to us? I think we have a receptive audience out there. And we can really change on that issue. I use that. I ran in a district that was a Hillary Clinton district. I have the only blue district left in the state. It's Hillary Clinton won about 5 points. And I was very upfront about my pro-life stance and went in and knocked on 8,000 doors and talked about it. People were very receptive. They were shocked. They were appalled. They were mad. And I'm talking about independent scale. I'm talking about soft Democrats, et cetera. So we need to be bold on that issue, take back over and reverse some of these really bad laws that have passed. Good news is with Amy Barrett's confirmation hearing, which is very timely, talking to you today, getting a 6-3 conservative majority on the court will help out greatly too.
And before I give you a chance to close, I want to ask one quick final question. And this is kind of, as I probably told you, I'm trying to get all the candidates on here. And one of the sections I like to go over is kind of, I like to have a good conversation, but also kind of a question on some of your past record that may come out against you in a primary, and your position on the transportation bill, supporting that in 2013, and also with Medicaid expansion. A lot of conservatives are cautious to that, and it does play a lot better to a general election audience. So how do you win over enough conservatives to win the primary and then unite the party and defeat the Democrats in 2021?
Well, number one, on so many of the core issues, Second Amendment, I think a lot of people know I've had an A rating from the NRA and about every other group. I was the one when Governor Northam called the special session after Virginia Beach, which was very political, and put all those gun control bills in. I was speaker, and I shut down that special session in 90 minutes. We've talked about the life issue, where I've twice been Family Foundation of the Year legislator. On taxes, you can look over my 31-year career. I voted for one tax increase, and that was 2313, which was a transportation bill in the 2013 timeframe. And on that particular one, it had a lot of reform of VDOT. It obviously saved a lot of money. And we were at the point infrastructure-wise, I would say. And we had, been very prudent and we had basically blocked so many Democratic tax increases. I thought it was time. I mean, if you look at sort of the roads all over the state, very rarely should you do that. But at that point, I thought it was necessary. It's interesting when I always remind people when I was speaker, we just cut taxes $1.2 billion on the heels of the President Trump's tax cut. So I'm very proud of my record on tax cuts. I think it stands up to about anyone. And I led on those types of things. So Medicaid expansion was an issue where we were 51-49. We had 7 or 8 delegates that really felt like we at least had to do something. And some of those were from Southwest Virginia. And I think the feeling was that Medicaid expansion is more for the working poor, in that a lot of those folks were working. So could we do something? I clearly did not have the votes. It was in the budget. And so we were looking at a budget lockdown, which would really harm Virginia. So I looked at Mike Pence's model in Indiana. When Mike Pence was governor of Indiana, he came up with a model that I liked. It was one that had work fare in it. So you basically get a work requirement. And so when I went to the governor, I said, I want these 7 principles to even consider it. And one was the work requirement. Medicaid expansion is a 90% federal, 10% state program. Regular Medicaid is 50-50. And I said, I don't have any confidence the federal government's going to keep the 90%. They've reneged on so many other things. So there's a kill switch in there that I put in there that if you fall below 90% funding, it goes away immediately. We don't come back and vote on it. It goes away immediately. Then I put 4 or 5 other free market principles. With that, I thought it was leadership. At that point, either we weren't going to have a budget, and so I voted for it and pushed that through. The leadership is not always easy. The reason I can unite the Republican Party is Republicans are looking to win the governorship. They really are. I think they want someone that has experience, who's done a lot with veterans and, as I've said, economic development. I raised about $8.2 million as speaker for other candidates. And the reality of life is you better be able to raise a lot of money when you're running for governor. I've been all over the state many times as speaker. I've worked with a lot of folks. I think you'll see a very big endorsement list. And also, I really do feel like when we get there, they've looked at Governor Northern's leadership abilities or lack thereof. And they just want someone who's going to be truthful with them, who's going to be candid, who's authentic. And hopefully I'm that person. That is hopefully my MO, and that's what I'll put forth.
Well, I just want to say, Kirk, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said earlier, it means so much to me. Is there anything else you want to say?
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I love Virginia. You know, I chose to be a government and history teacher because I used to tell my kids it's the most important subject. We have a wonderful representative democracy. We're the birthplace of representative democracy. And it's just my passion to return us to those values. And I'll end with this. The first time in my lifetime, there's such a difference in Republicans and Democrats. Democrats seem to not even embrace those key values that we hold so dear today. And it's almost a very fight for what we believe in the greatness of this country. We've not always been perfect, but boy, we have been that shining city on a hill, and I want to get us back to that. So that's why I want to lead and be governor of Virginia, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much.